They say the narrow drowns all it takes, but they are wrong. It is not the water that kills you, though it fills your lungs. It is not the cold that kills you, though it steals the warmth from your very bones. It is not the darkness that kills you, though it swallows you down deep. Your blood chilled, your legs burning, your eyes blind in the dark. You are alive when the vicious current slams you against the rocks again and again. The first impact splinters your leg. The second crushes your ribs. The third is gentle in comparison, your skull clipping a sharp snag of rock, but it is enough to end your awareness of your brief, wild tumble through the drowning dark. The current drags you down, a ribbon of scarlet blood chasing behind you. Down among the caves carved by the relentless rushing of the water, you are spun and tossed until you come to rest, wedged against some outcrop of stone, the endless flow of murky water pinning you in place. Your eyes, empty, stare upward, as if searching for the light, but there is none down here. There is nothing but the cold and the darkness and the drowned. They will search for your body along the shores, but they will never find you. They say that what the narrow takes does not return. They are wrong about that, too. That's a quote from The Narrow by Kate Alice Marshall. This is YA Book Chat, and I'm your host, Leah Stuhler. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of YA Book Chat. Thank you so much for being here and for continuing to listen. Today, we are going to be chatting about the brand new book, The Narrow by Kate Alice Marshall. And I'm very excited to have Kate here with me to talk about this. Kate is the author of both young adult and middle grade books. Some of her titles include I Am Still Alive, Rules for Vanishing, No One Can Know, and Bee's Fleeting Shadows. And her latest book, which we are discussing today, The Narrow, was just released on August 1st of this year. Well, welcome to YA Book Chat, Kate. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself to get us started?
Sure. I think that you've covered a lot of my writing credentials and history. I write in all sorts of age categories, middle grade, YA, and adult, and I love dark stories, horror and thrillers, and delving into the spooky side of fiction.
I love that. I have only more recently, probably within the last year, really gotten more into like the spooky, dark horror YA fiction, but I found that I really enjoy it quite a bit. So it's a fun genre. How long have you been writing? Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do or something more recent years?
I have definitely always known that I wanted to be a writer. And by that, I mean, my mom is a writer, and my dad has always been a really amazing storyteller. And I think the first time that I said that I wanted to write books for a living, I was about 4 years old.
Hmm.
And except for a very brief stint where I wanted to be a marine biologist because I thought that meant that I would get to have a pet otter, it's pretty much been the first and only goal professionally that I've really worked towards. So I always wrote little stories about. I had a quote unquote novel in a mead composition book called Bagel the Magical Beagle when I was in elementary school, and another one called The Doll That Came to Life. And, they'd be 5 pages long in giant blocky kid writing, but I considered them my novels. And then I started to get a little more serious about things in middle school and high school.
I love that. That's so fun. And I also love that you said that you had wanted to be a marine biologist because I actually, for a very long time, also wanted to be a marine biologist. Although, as much as I do love otters and think that they are so adorable, I think mine was more motivated by dolphins. So, but either way.
That makes sense.
I mean, when I was growing up, we had Lisa Frank stickers with and folders and notebooks and all the things, which always featured these gorgeous dolphins on them. So who knows? Maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah, I think I remember the neon Lisa Frank dolphins on everything.
Hmm. Well, why don't you tell everybody what The Narrow is all about?
The Narrow is about Eden, a girl who has arrived at her beloved boarding school only to discover that there's a problem with her tuition. And if she can't come up with the money quickly, she's going to be sent home, which is really not an option for her. She gets an offer to stay with a young woman on campus who has to live in a special house, isolated because she has a mysterious medical condition that means that she can't come into contact with any water that hasn't been specially treated and distilled. And so Eden agrees to live with her as a kind of companion and keep her company. And then she starts to notice strange things happening, like wet footprints appearing on the floor leading up to the bottom of her bed. And she hears the rain at night, even when it wasn't raining. And she discovers that there is an old story on campus about a ghost called the Drowning Girl, who seems to have some kind of connection to the girl who lives in this house, Delphine. And as Eden starts to grow close to Delphine and develop a relationship with her, this haunting intensifies, and she realizes that she needs to uncover the story of the drowning girl in order to protect herself and Delphine.
It's such a fun, creepy ghost story. Like it just, there were so many different points when I was reading it that just like gave me shivers. And I was like, ooh, this is fantastic.
That's how you know you've done your job right.
That's right. But before we talk about the story, I wanted to take a minute just to talk about this cover because it is fantastic. I love the purple coloring and the background, but then we've got the house and it's got the water, and you see a girl floating in the water. And we don't know who she is, but she looks very ethereal because she's all in white and like she could maybe be the ghost. And I love how the ripples actually like go up through the title. It's just so fantastic. Did you have any say like in the process of the cover creation, or did they just kind of send this to you and say, here, what do you think?
Yeah, Vikings cover department, their design department is really fabulous. And I've gotten a lot of really great covers from them. And this was one where we tried a few different things to hit just the right tone and the right image. And when this particular image came along, it was immediately like, oh yeah, that one, that's the right one. And I love the color scheme that they added. I think it all just comes together to really evoke the feeling of the haunting in this book.
It really does. When your publicist emailed me and I read the little blurb, about what the book was about, but then when I opened up the attachment that she sent and I saw the cover, I was like, oh, that's it. I'm in. I'm in for this book. It just, yeah, it's just the cover. It's nothing. I mean, there's nothing like having a fantastic cover to really help draw you into the story.
Absolutely. I think that I've been particularly lucky with mine. From the very first book that I had with Viking, I Am Still Alive. I just fell in love with that one right away, and they just keep knocking it out of the park.
They do such a great job. I've read so many of their books and I just love it. All their covers are fantastic. So we have a nice, creepy, haunting ghost story. Can you tell me about what inspired this story? Like, how did the idea for this come about and how did the story develop?
This was a book that I came up with kind of in concert with my editor to a certain extent. I often send her sort of a batch of ideas of things that I would like to work on next, because I definitely have more ideas than I can possibly work on. And so I'll be like, here are all of the shiny little things that I want to play with right now. Which one do you think would work best? And one of the things that I wanted to do was write just a ghost story. I've written books that have ghosts in them, but none of them are what I would categorize as a ghost story that is centered on a haunting. And so I wanted to try something that had more of that classic structure to it. And I had the basic idea for the setup, although it was fairly different than it ended up being. But I knew that I needed an extra element of some kind to make it more me. It felt a little bit plain. And so I had the girl, I had kind of a feeling of isolation, I had this haunting, and I had some of the broad strokes of sort of the backstory of the ghost. But it wasn't until I added in the element of the wet footprints and the girl who almost drowned on dry land that it really came together. And then after that, it developed very organically and quickly.
So I've always enjoyed a good ghost story and a haunting, but there are, some stories that have, your typical like elements to them, but then there are some that have kind of different ones. And I felt like the wet footsteps and the like rain, how Eden keeps hearing rain, even though it's not really raining. I felt like those were really unique aspects to put in and kind of just really helped intensify the haunting that much. It was great. Like I said, I've read like ghost haunting stories before, but none with unique elements like that. And then they also like fit obviously really well with the story and what happens with the river. So it's a fun aspect to put in there. Fun little thing.
Yeah, I always need to know what the book feels like. And some of that is emotional, and then some of it is in terms of its imagery. And so that was what I was really missing, and where the water came in. And then the explanations for why there would be moist ghosts were more of a process of problem solving and kind of putting together a puzzle.
Yes. Why are the ghosts wet? It all makes sense though. It all works together.
Yes, it did all come together.
Well, since this is the first like ghost story and haunting that you've written, compared to your other books, what was the most challenging part about writing this story?
I think the most challenging part was actually more the human element of it. And for me, the human, very grounded part of this story and what's going on in Eden's life is a lot more frightening and more emotionally dark than the supernatural elements. And so balancing that and working out the character arcs and the emotional arcs, and especially figuring out how to balance Eden's emotional state so that you felt the depth of what she was going through without the book just becoming mired in it. So, you still need to be able to have forward momentum, and she needs to be able to pick herself up off the floor and go figure out what's going on with ghosts. And that can be tricky when you're dealing with something where it was really a dive into some really dark emotional states.
Yes, Eden definitely has lots of very dark emotional things that she is dealing with. But I would say, like, from my perspective as the reader, that it balances out. I felt like it balanced out really well. We feel like I felt her emotion so much, like with all of the trauma and what she goes through. Like, I almost, like, I could picture it because it was very vivid in your description. And it made me like angry for her and sad and just feeling all of these emotions and wanting to go out and punch somebody like the person who made her feel that way. Like I wanted to go punch the person who made her feel that way. But
absolutely.
But I mean, she was able to also, still like at the same time kind of focus on the mystery and what was happening to her. But, like with anybody, I think too, is very realistic in the way that you did it as well, because she like with triggering events and whatnot. She has the flashbacks, and that's, I feel like what we all do. We might experience different types of trauma. And then as we move forward and try and like live our lives and overcome these things, like there are things that trigger and we kind of go back to these memories. So, she
Mhm.
had that happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's very stuck in what happened while trying to just ignore it and move forward. But she also has a very strong drive, and she's very interested in Delphine and in what's going on. And so that draws her forward even as she's being pulled back. And so keeping those tensions going at the same time is what allowed me to have that depth of emotion and have her also be this very active character with a lot of narrative momentum to her.
Yeah, she's a fantastic character. And while we're on characters, since we have just talked about Eden a little bit and what she's going through, I did also want to mention Delphine as well. And with Delphine, Eden has this trauma that she's been dealing with, and she's been hiding it from her friends. And, like we just talked about, she's trying to figure that out, but at the same time, figure out why she's being haunted and what's happening. Delphine, on the other hand, she's a young woman who feels like she can't really be her true self. She's isolated in this house. She's, being treated almost like she's a doll, kind of a very fragile porcelain doll. Her mom has this like cookie cutter mold that she wants Delphine to fit into, but Delphine is not really sure, and she can't really feel free to express herself very well. So tell me what it was like creating her character and developing that.
Yeah, Delphine was a really tricky one. She is really interesting in that she's a bit of an enigma, especially in the beginning. And she's a little odd because of the way that she's been forced to live. And so, kind of figuring out ways to reveal her from Eden's perspective was a lot of fun. The In terms of her arc, she's very much a mirror and a foil for Eden in a lot of ways. And so I sort of think of it as I constructed her arc to reflect and support Eden's to a certain extent. And it's sort of like building a trellis for a plant. So I had the structure, and then from there, it sort of grows organically. And there are all sorts of little surprises and things that are just a natural outgrowth of what I'd set up. And so it was really a fun process. I think that Delphine is sort of the reflection and inverse of Eden in that what she is, the mask that she's putting on, casting it off is something that gives her an immediate sense of freedom. And for Eden, she's really afraid of what happens if she stops pretending like everything is okay and being the person she thinks that people want her to be. And so seeing Delphine be freed by that process is really important for her.
They both come so far in the book from start to finish. They have these fantastic character arcs. And I did really love like the moment for both of them, but especially for Delphine, when she does have this breakthrough toward the end. I just felt like it was a very beautiful moment, just seeing her kind of come into her own and being able to express herself differently. It's a really special moment for her, and then for her and Eden together as well.
I think their relationship was the perfect heart for the book, especially as you start to see the other relationship in the book that is part of the drowning girl's story and how those compare and contrast to each other.
Yes, it was very interesting putting the two relationships up against each other. Was that tricky for you? Like, because they are very different. Was it harder to develop one relationship than the other?
I think that everything in this book had its own particular challenges. I think it's in a lot of ways one of the harder books that I've written to just fine tune because of all of these interconnected pieces. And in the process of revising it, a lot of it was about recognizing in any particular moment for any particular turn in the plot, which of these relationships is the one that is the most, I don't want to say important, but the one that is most symbolic of what is happening in the book right now and the one that has the most thematic resonance, and then letting the other one shift a little bit to reflect that. So it was about deciding what the story is saying and then letting things shape around that.
Got it. That makes sense. And speaking of shaping stories, I always like to ask authors this question when it comes to a story like this, because I'm always interested to see, how they develop the stories. So, because with this one, like we said, it's got the ghost and the haunting, but at the same time, it's also a bit of a mystery factor to it because Eden is trying to figure out what happened to the drowning girl and why it's affecting her and Delphine, that whole story. Tell me about how you write this, what it's like trying to write this, kind of keep everybody on their toes, your readers, as they're reading. But like keeping it where they can't figure out everything all at once, or, the mystery's not gonna be revealed to them so soon.
Well, that is honestly one of the biggest jobs of a revision for me. My first drafts, the mystery structure is always just complete chaos, and you figure out some things way too soon, and then there are a million revelations in the last 10 pages, kind of a thing. So the job of the first draft for me is to figure out what the mysteries are and what the answers are, and the job of the subsequent drafts is to make sure that those questions and their answers are paced properly. Suspense really is a matter of pacing in writing mysteries. So you sort of, I seed mysteries of all sizes, from a little mention of a memory you don't know the context for, and then you quickly learn the context, to the big questions like who is the drowning girl, that are, big and obvious and right out in front. But some of those mysteries will pay off within paragraphs, and some of them will pay off in the next chapter, and some of them will take the whole book to unfold. And the key is to layer them so that they're always manageable. You're not just asking a whole bunch of questions and leaving an ambiguous mess for the reader to work through, but you're getting that tempo of intrigue and satisfaction, and really fine-tuning that is one of my primary concerns in any revision.
I find as a reader, I do definitely like having the smaller hints, like you were saying, like at the beginning where there's a question, and because then I'm like thinking about it for the whole and I'm like, when am I going to find out about this? But this is really good. I know that this must be important, and then I'm like waiting, holding my breath, waiting until I come back to that and get that answer. It is fun, I feel like, as a reader to have those answers, like slowly revealed to you. I've definitely read books where the end of the book, like the last couple of pages, was like a complete info dump. And so you get everything all at once. And I was like, and I haven't, it's a different feeling to it. While I feel like, I may have enjoyed the book as a whole that way, like I am definitely more of along the lines of what you were saying, where I enjoy like having the info given to me like bits by bits. And then because then I feel like I'm figuring it out along with the characters. And so it makes me feel more connected to them too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also really important for the characters to get information like big reveal with enough time to react to it. Because if you're getting them one after the other, there's really not time to feel the reverberations of that. And it takes a lot of dramatic potential out of the mystery.
Oh yeah, completely. It's much better when, as the reader, we're able to get the character's reaction to it also, instead of just like a couple little paragraphs at the end of the book, like, oh, great, you just told me all of this, and now the book is done. And I'm like, but I need
Yeah,
time
I
to
mean,
process
there's
this.
the more the more Agatha Christie style of mystery
Mhm.
where, you really are solving a puzzle. I think supports that a bit more, to have that big reveal and laying all the pieces out at the end, because that's the point of it. But in a story where the mystery is in service to a character journey, the character needs time for that to impact their journey.
Absolutely. All right, so we've talked about Eden and Delphine and the drowning girl, but there is also another major character in this, and that is the Narrow itself, the river, because it is, like kind of the centerpiece here and why all of these things have happened. And I'm curious because you wrote in the acknowledgments that the river is based on the Bolton Stride part of the River Wharf in England. So I was wondering, have you ever been there and seen that, or is it something that you did research on?
I have not. I think that I first came across the Bolton Strid when I was reading some random roundup article on like the most dangerous places in the world, and it immediately caught my interest, and I read all about whatever I could find about it, and I was like, someday I'm going to find a way to use something like this in a book. It's just a section of the river that is quite narrow, and so the banks are so close together that you can jump across it, and it looks like a nice little babbling brook, but it's actually extremely deep, and the water under the surface runs very, very fast. And there are these sort of caves and crevices gouged out by the movement of the water beneath it. And so people who fall in get sucked under, and sometimes they don't ever come back up. And it is remarkably deadly for such a peaceful looking river. And I love both just the danger of that and also the symbolism of it, that the deceptiveness of it, and how it is something that appears to be safe, but there's great danger down below. And I think that that really echoes what's going on for Eden in the book, and that she is trying to maintain this very peaceful, placid surface to her life while there's so much tumultuous stuff going on just below the surface. And then, of course, there are many other layers of secrets in the book waiting to be have their depths discovered.
Yes, there are definitely a lot of secrets in this book. And I love that. Like coming across, because Eden has secrets that we pretty quickly kind of figure out some of what is going on with her. But, Delphine also has secrets. The drowning girl has secrets. One of Eden's professors has some secrets. And so there is a lot to figure out. And I love that comparison. Total honesty here, this is like the river in this was super creepy for me. Like, honestly, I don't know why, but this has always been one of my biggest fears, like drowning in water. And so, and maybe it's because I almost did drown when I was like 3 years old, and it probably stems from that. But like,
I have a very vivid memory of being knocked under a wave at the beach, and I wasn't in any real danger, but the absolute terror of the moment when I wasn't sure if I could come back up again, I think has
mhm.
really stuck with me, because These days, I have to work really hard not to drown a character in a book. I keep going, oh no, I can't do that again. So this is my big one. And then I think I have to lay off it for a while.
Well, I'm glad you were able to get it in this book and kind of get it out of your system for that. Oh, man. Well, I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. This is such a fantastic book. And for everybody who's listening, if you love creepy ghost stories and, dark stories, you definitely should check out The Narrow because it is fantastic. And I will be sure to post in the show notes for everybody today links to Kate's website and her social media and where you can purchase The Narrow so that you can check all of this out.
And it's worth mentioning that there are content warnings on my website at katemarshallbooks.com if that is something that you want to look into, given some of the subject matter.
Yes, and I will definitely be sure to mention that in my notes as well. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Kate. It's really been great having you on.
It's been really great chatting with you.
And thank you so much to everybody for listening, and we will chat again soon. Today's episode featured the book The Narrow by Kate Alice Marshall. I'd like to say a special thank you to Kate for coming on the podcast today and chatting with me. And I'd also like to say thank you to Caitlin Neefsey at Penguin Young Readers for setting up the interview. Be sure to follow YA Book Chat on Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you get your episodes as soon as they are available. YA Book Chat is hosted by, was created and edited by me, Leah Stuhler.